Here is an EOAlive Grande story.
This Monday, Republican congressional candidate and former state senator Cliff Bentz held a town hall at Riverside Park in Grande. Bentz was joined by Senator Bill Hansell, who is also running for re-election this fall.
Everybody, we're going to say our names first. So I'm Alex Gande. I'm with the Gande Republicans. Awesome. Ken? What's your name?
Ken Parsons and my wife Joanne is over there. We own a farm out in the middle of the valley.
Nathan from here in Grande.
Mary West, Ambler, teacher and egg person. All my life.
Matt Scarfield, County Commissioner.
Mike Bird.
Sabrina Thompson, the Grande Observer.
I'm Charlotte Wasley.
Warner Wasley.
I'm Josh Anderson, and I'm with Senator Bill.
Alan Duffy, I'm the mayor of Elgin.
I'm Bill Hansell, State Senator, another one that Oregon 11.
Sharon Cheney, Union County Central Committee Treasurer.
Sharon Back, Mayor of Alisal.
Rob
Harvard.
Dave,
Assistant to the Mayor.
Deputy from Belgium.
All right, let's see Senator Bentz big hand.
Realize for the first time I don't have some Zoom meeting that I have to go to on the afternoon. I talked with Cliff. He was in Umatilla County, and we had a series of meetings before he came over here that I was with him on. I said, well, I'm going to just drive over and listen to you again. So it's good to be here. Cliff is an absolute outstanding individual. When I heard he was running, I said, I'm all in and do everything I can to help you. And it's been my privilege. I served with him in the legislature for all 8 years. 6 of them when he was in the House, 2 as colleagues in the Senate. He will do a wonderful job in Washington, D.C. And appreciate the opportunity and appreciate the opportunity to call him my friend. So, good.
Bill. By the way, you guys should give Bill a big hand. He's an incredible senator for you and done a wonderful job. Please, let's give him. I pointed out that Bill and I, along with 9 other senators, all left the state to stop cap and trade and to stop a bad gun bill. We were successful. And then that happened again just back in February, and those bills were stopped again. The rumors we hear now are that the cap and trade bill will not be coming back because, as we all knew, it was a tax masquerading as a climate solution. And now we've been told that because the state's financial situation is so desperate, we'll not see cap and trade coming in because they don't want to be seeing any money raised in that space. Instead, we'll see other suggested higher taxes. No particular surprise because there's so much damage being done by this virus to the state's economy. By the way, thank you all for wearing masks. We should be doing all that we can to try to keep people safe, and in particular, pushing up or pushing down the fear of people of catching the virus. Because if you're scared that you're going to catch the virus, you are not going to go out and shop, and you're not going to go out to dinner, and you're not going to go out. And as a result, our economy will not recover. And if we don't recover the economy, we're going to run out of money. We won't be able to keep going to Washington, D.C. and digging up trillions of dollars to shove into that empty hole that exists by virtue of the economy not working. So the trick is we've got to make people understand that they can be safe, and one way of doing that is with masks. And we can debate for a long time how much safer they keep you, but what I did in my part of the state when people began to ask that, I said, why don't we talk to those those people, you hear about them every once in a while, they're called doctors. Why don't we talk to these doctors about what they think we should do when it comes to masks? So I called 10 of them, many of them my friends, and I asked them if they would please tell me what we should do. And 9 of the 10 said, for goodness sakes, wear masks. So when someone asks me what it is we should be doing, I simply say, why don't you ask a doctor? Because they would be the most likely people to know. The virus right now is causing terrific damage, and what I've been trying to say to people is, it's not the need for the trillions of dollars. There's no doubt that trying to push money in to keep our economy going while we try to figure out a solution is exactly the right thing to do. What's missing is we're not talking about how we're going to pay it back. Everybody seems to think that we can print the money or borrow it with no thought about what's going to happen next. And that's no good, because at some point, we're going to have to do something about getting that money back. The best way to try to head that off is by having more people working, more people buying, more people selling, making our economy work again as quickly as we can get it there. That's the solution. And again, that takes us back to the original point, which better wear masks, better figure out some way of keeping people convinced that they're going to be safe if they go out. That brings us nicely to schools. And the question is, how in the world do we open back up our schools? And the answer is, well, however we can do it, keeping the teachers safe. The problem we have now is that the kids, as I quoted this morning, I hope this figure is right, about 3 out of each 100,000 will catch the virus. When it comes to people over 50 or 60, it's 8 to 10 times that amount. So the kids are far less susceptible to this problem. Still, there's no reason to try to put them at risk. But if we don't get kids back into school, it means the people that use school for daycare won't be able to go back to work. And so we not only are we not getting our kids educated up, but we're not getting them back to work. So somehow, again, we've got to turn our attention to how we're going to keep people safe. So that's what should be our primary focus now. Just a few words about Black Lives Matter. I will be the first to say, and I'm quoting other people, that when it comes to race, we can always do better. I don't think there's anybody here that's going to do that. We can always do better. And I quote, you have to help me out, Crenshaw, the congressman that has an eye patch, and his quote quite simply is, I do my best in this period of time not to give offense, and I do my best not to take it. Because as these conversations about race are ongoing, it's very easy to get really upset really fast. So the trick is, let's try to remain calm, let's do our best to figure out how to do a better job when it comes to people that are not of our race. And beyond that, I'm not going to say much more about this, because it's a challenging space to jump into when you don't have a plan and you don't know yet how it's going to turn out. I will say that when it comes to protests, I want to share with you just a couple of thoughts. First, as you know, the occupation at the bird refuge was just not very far from where my brothers raised cattle and where I grew up. In fact, I stayed on the refuge years ago. My dad and I stayed in a little hotel down there at Diamond when I think I was 6 years old. And then our family's ranches are in and around that space. My granddad actually came to that space 104 years ago when Swift Meatpacking Company bought what was then part of the Glen estate and turned it into a large ranch. So my family's been in that space forever. When those people took it over and brought guns to the party and turned violent, no longer a protest. All in favor of it until that moment. At that point, no. You got to have, if you're going to have change that doesn't result in something like the French Revolution, where it turned out badly for a lot of folks, really badly, you better have peace and some sort of civil arrangement to effect change. When you're throwing bricks and rocks and building fires at the federal building in Portland, that's not the way to effect change. Now, I'm not saying they won't effect change. It's just that I'm not sure what kind. And I'll just say there's far better ways to do it. One of the things that's been hugely disturbing to me is the remark, I've heard it over and over again. We can damage all of your property. We can throw bricks through your roof. We can burn down your house. And you can't do anything because the issue we're fighting for is so important. Okay. There's no doubt about the importance of getting our racial situations down. No doubt. But you can't get there if you're busy burning down the house you try to live in. Won't work. And so how we're going to approach that is going to be a huge challenge, and one that I look forward to working on when I get to Washington, D.C. with others that are interested in this space. When all of us, I think, should be. Just a few questions, a few remarks about the race. As you know, because of a great support from people like Bentz and Senator Hansell, and I'm sure others here, so forgive me if I don't call your name out, I won the primary by almost 10 points over Newt Mueller. But that meant I only got 32,000 of the 120,000 Republican votes. I still beat everybody else by 10% or more. But that means I've got to go out somehow and make sure all the rest of those 120,000 people know who I am. That costs money. So you might guess what I'm doing right now is out asking the people that already supported me to help me again, like my brothers and others. And you can imagine how unpopular I am in the family. But the truth of it is, they know it's going to take money to try to win this race. And by the way, there are 800,000 people in the district. 800,000 people. In my Senate district and Bill's district, we each had 130,000. So you can see this is quite the step up. If you're going to be elected, you've got to get to the rest of those folks and say, hey, this is who I am, and this is what I stand for. We are trying to do that, and we're making some progress. I would say that we're doing great in that space, but we're not doing as well as might have been the case had we not had the virus. Because this is one of the first of these, well, it's not the first. This is about the fourth of these kind of meetings I've had since the primary. Why? Because too dangerous. We've been staying at home. We've been doing Zoom meetings by video over and over and over again. I have lost track, maybe 60, 70, 80 of them. Most of them are focused on fundraising, and it's been successful, but we have a long way to go. And so I'd love to be doing more of these every week, but it's a challenge when we're struggling with this virus. So I appreciate all of you being here for the reasons I already mentioned, but I hate to put anybody at risk. This week I will go back to Ontario and do more Zoom stuff, sometimes as many 7 Zoom calls a day. I'll be doing, and then leaving on Saturday, heading to Bend, and then down to Medford, and then over to Grants Pass, and then back to, actually back to Pendleton, and then back home. That's next week, and then we plan on doing more of that every few days if this works out. The one other thing I'll mention that's been extremely interesting, and I wish every one of you could run for Congress. I honestly, I wish you could. One, because you've never gotten so much advice in your life. So many people are so sure of what they want you to do once you get there. It'd be nice if everybody could go. But what's been terrifically interesting is the conversations I've been able to have with other congressmen and women. Because everybody knows that you only get something done with 435 people. So 434 you got to get to know. And so far I've met 15. That's it. 15, that's all. And I've been trying to call them during the daytime, but they're really busy voting and doing all kinds of things. Now all the votes are split up. It takes about 4 hours or 3 hours now to do one vote that used to take 2 minutes. Why? Because they're not putting everybody in the room at the same time. So you all have to go in, or a third of you all have to go back out, and they clean the room, they bring the third in. So it's very challenging. But the people I've been talking to are great. The one quote I heard that I thought was pretty amusing was, as a new congressman, it's like being flown over the jungle, dumped out of a helicopter, and you hack out a little space for yourself, and you try to survive. And that's what it's like, because you're trying to get to know those other 430 people. And the more people that you know, the more you can get done. But it depends so much on friendships and relationships and who's who as you work your way through the process. So I've been working on that. I've also learned that everybody wants to know what committees you're going to be on. So, since I know what committees are in Salem, but I certainly didn't know what committees are in Washington, D.C. So I spent a considerable amount of time researching the committees and trying to figure out which one would work best here. There are 4 probably that work great here. Greg Walden has the best one right now, Energy and Commerce, the EOC committee. But the truth of it is, you can't get on that so-called A committee as a freshman. It's hugely unusual. So the odds of me being on EC, the EC committee, my first year are very low. Doesn't matter, because to me, I still would suggest it when I asked any other people, but it's much more likely that I would end up on natural resources, agriculture, or transportation and infrastructure. Those are the 3 that are probably the most likely. I could go for armed services, but we don't have a huge armed services component in CD2. We've got Air Force Wing down in Cape Falls, and we've got some other spaces here and there, but not many. So those are the ones that I've been generally talking about. I don't have to decide until sometime probably in September. I got a call from Kevin, 3 calls from Kevin McCarthy the last couple of weeks. Last week before last, he asked me to please come to Washington, D.C. in September, have a fundraiser, sit down with him, and talk about what committees I would like to be on. Now, all of this assumes I'm going to win. I will only win with your help and your support, whether it's financial, or whether it's by putting up signs, or whether it's by making calls, or whether it's by telling your Republicans to get out to vote. We have 9% more Republicans in this district than we have Democrats. 9%. If every one of the Republicans vote, I win. If they don't, who knows? When I say if all Republicans vote, if they vote for me. And so I want to make it clear, I am asking for your vote, and I'm asking for your support. But more importantly, or as important, you got to call your friends and tell them about it. So with that, I'll be happy to answer whatever questions you have. I'll be perfectly honest with you. If I don't know the answer, I'll just tell you. Because there's a zillion questions, and many of them I simply haven't had a chance to focus on. I didn't focus on any policy until after I'd won the primary. There's no reason. I had to win the primary first. And for the biggest part of my time now, I spend it listening and then trying to answer questions or say no. So with that, what questions do you have?
One quick note, we do have a sign-up sheet over on this table. If you're able to sign your name in and fill out that information, we would very much appreciate it.
And that's Josh. He's my assistant here today. And as I've told other people, he has the difficult job of laughing at all my jokes as we drive. We'll do 400 miles today. I've heard at least most of them twice. Any questions at all?
Senator Bill, I'm very grateful for you putting the effort to win the nomination. And I think the fact that you did win the nomination for the Republican seat is a good against an opponent which takes a very different view of what a Republican is than the majority of the folks I think here do. However, I've been involved here locally in leadership in the Republican Party for about 14 years, and I am starting to hear from people that are both inside and conservatives that are outside the Republican Party. It's the same thing that I heard during the Tea Party movement. People are very disturbed with the lack of leadership of the Republican Party, not our president, the Republican Party, when it comes to fear-mongering with the virus, and also not a clear response to not a civil rights issue, but an issue of government overturn by a Marxist organization, Black Lives Matter. Having said that, sir, I'll give you my credentials to speak on the black issue because half of my family is black, okay? And so I feel like I've had a little bit of contact with this issue, and maybe a little more than typical here in Eastern Oregon. And it is abundantly clear that that organization is not about civil rights. It's about the subjugation of people with Marxist rule. And we need to be clear about that. And I would suggest, sir, that like I told our own local committee, that there are things that are just as contagious as the coronavirus, They are cowardice and courage. I suggest that we as a Republican Party need to rally around people who are courageous and throw out those that are cowardice. So that's my encouragement to you. From what I hear, I get calls. One day I got 2 calls in one day of people. Mike, what can I do? I don't see things happening. I don't see things happening, and we're losing our country. And I don't just hang around rabble-rousers. I hang around a few legitimate people too. Anyway, that's my encouragement to you, sir. I know you said you get a lot of advice, and maybe that's a bit of advice, but it's what I have to offer. So please be courageous. Make a stand on these issues. Grab the narrative. The other party has no problem with appearing as complete and utter idiots and radicals. And so, really, it's an open table for us. We need to grab the narrative. We need to clearly articulate the science with the COVID. We need to clearly articulate the politics with the group and separate the phrase from the group. Thank you for hearing me out.
Well, I appreciate what you just said, and I should have mentioned what you just said on separating the phrase from the group. That's nicely put. I did go online and check out what the Black Lives Matter group stood for. Made an outline of it. It's back in my office. That which they stand for in large part is, as you say, a socialistic approach to everything that we fought against here in America for a long time. What I've learned, though, is it's very, very easy to talk about the wrong-headedness of what they're doing, but it's also easy for them to turn it on you and suddenly say that that you are in some fashion racist, or you are in some fashion opposed to helping those who are not white. And so you've got to tread in this space pretty carefully.
There are probably 24 black intellectuals that have been speaking on this issue for at least 40 years. Bob Woodson, who was a part of the civil rights movement, every much a part as Martin Luther King himself. And Thomas Sowell, who just turned 90 and published another book. These people are world-renowned experts in these issues, and they never get mentioned. McWhorter is a young guy. These are all black intellectuals. So I would say you bring those people out.
They get mentioned. We've all read Thomas Sowell, right? So I'm saying what he's saying is he's got to take a stance that does not fly in the face of something. It is a delicate thing. You can't go in and start hammering heads and saying they're all full of BS and they're not right. Well, we know that. Now we need to just point that out and expose them for what they are. But you're not going to do that by ranting.
I'm not saying ranting, Rob.
What's that?
I'm not saying ranting. I'm saying that we've got to come back with facts on these things, and we've got to quote the people that know, like Thomas Sowell.
So let me just share with you one thought, and I want this to be understood in this fashion. There were 15 unarmed black people killed by the police across the United States in 2019. That was 15 too many. It's 15 out of 44 million people who are black. That was 15 too many. Now, how many people are going to say that I was trying to belittle or show how small the problem is by calling that out? How many? What I'm trying to say is it's a huge problem. But when you say use the facts, you better be super careful how you use them. Because this area is far more than just those 15 people that lost their lives. By the way, there were 1,006, I think, total people that lost their lives that were unarmed in America in 2019. These are taken from the Washington Post. Why were those people who were unarmed, why did they lose their lives? I don't know. I'm not a police person. But I'll tell you, I'm guessing if we went and talked to all the folks and they found out they were unarmed, they would be terrifically sad about it. Just guessing. But this is a very, very, very sensitive space, and one that needs to be managed really carefully. And that's why saying at the very beginning, we can all do better. That's, I think we'll all agree on that. How we get there, I don't know yet. Well, one last point. If you look, as I do at all of the, whether it's MSNBC or whether it's CNN or whether it's Fox News or any of those spaces, on CNN and MSNBC, you will see, and also on OPB, you will see this attempt to use all these things that are happening as a way to get rid of the president. That's what they're doing. And they're also using it as a way to advance what I'm going to call the liberal format, or some would call it the socialist, some would go further. And they're trying to use all of these things to say, there's all these terrible things, and the only way to get rid of them is by adopting a new system, get rid of the capitalistic. That's what they're trying to do. That is wrong. I recognize it. One of the reasons I want to go to Washington, D.C. is to make sure we can protect what has done so much to advance our economy now. I understand the value of private property. I would do all I can to protect it. I already made that point earlier, as I was talking about people throwing bricks through people's windows. But this is a complicated space.
Well, I think what he's saying is the wimpiness of the Republicans who say all lives matter and then apologize for it because they attack him. Instead of saying, well, to me all lives do matter.
But what's happening on the other side of the issue is people are looking for that as an opportunity to belittle you. You can say it. I've said it often enough. All lives matter. Now, where do we go from there? But this is a complicated area. I just want to say, I'm willing to work on it any way I can and protect what you're saying, what we do say. Yeah.
They'll belittle you for anything. You can't be afraid to speak your views and get across to people where you really stand, because you're afraid they're going to criticize you or belittle you. You have to stand up for what's right. The Democrats have no problem stating their views and pushing them. The Republicans are nowhere to be found most of the time. I frankly don't discuss it with the Republicans. They're just weak, they're wishy-washy, and I want somebody strong that will stand up and express the view strongly that all lives matter, or something along that line. And we can't pour, by the way, another $3 trillion into this economy. That worries me. Say that we have to do a lot. People don't even have a concept when it's $1 trillion. 37,000 years. If you count it by seconds, $1 trillion is 37,000 years. And a billion is 31 years. So that's a difference. And it's trillions of dollars. And so, we've gone from $3 trillion, now we go up to 5. Somebody needs to say no. Don't worry about that.
There's got to be a stop somewhere.
So I have some more advice. I would take the Ag and Natural Resource Committee, because the biggest thing in this area that's a problem for us is the Endangered Species Act. It needs to be amended, and that committee would be the ones that would do it. And it's being ignored now, and they're going right on listing more meat species and more acres and more ruins.
So I would say the most important thing when it comes to revising the Endangered Species Act is getting Trump reelected.
Yes.
And so,
because we will do something about it.
And when it comes to speaking out loudly, the challenge is to get the president reelected, because all of the talk in the world is not going to do very much if we don't get the president reelected. By the way, as you know, the president did step in and try to modify, and did modify NEPA in a way that was designed to try to reduce litigation and shrink the amount of time to actually get something done. And I spoke to a series of different people in Bedford about whether or not that, in the timber space, whether or not that was going to help. And it will help a little. The key is to understand that that's way more than anybody else has been able to do. So, sure. And I would be doing my best to find the points of change that we can affect when it comes to the Endangered Species Act. As most of you know, how much time I spent trying to protect ranchers from the sage grouse disaster, how much now on the spotted frog over in and around Pineville, and then of course the district, the space, and of course the spotted owl goes without saying, and then of course I've lost track of my number of trips down literally to Gate Falls to address the short-lived sucker. I mean, and it's not an issue. So yeah, I'm with you. So, please.
I just think, Trump is basically rebranding the Republican Party for trying to, because the Republicans have been campaigning on all these issues that they've always believed in for 40 years, and then once they have a chance to take a stand, they compromise or they get caught off, or they betray us. They betrayed the Tea Party once they got the majority, and then they just didn't fund their reelection. And now we've got, Mitch McConnell is funding an opponent to a pro-Trump Republican from Kansas. And when we read stuff like that, we think, well, what good does it do to try to get some of these people reelected when they're just going to turn around and cave or do something that you just can't quite figure out why they're not supporting a president?
I don't know those people, so I can't answer your question. But I've taken it upon myself to do my very best to get this job and then to try to help this space that we all call home. That's my movement. And the trick is to try to figure out how best to do it. And it's a moving target.
I think you made a big point on the fact that you brought up Trump. And let me tell you, if he quit tweeting, things would be a heck of a lot better. But he has gone against the system. He has tried to drain the swamp, and he's had a lot of criticism. And Commissioner, there's a lot of things I like about him, and there's some things I don't like about him, but I think he, like Sharon and Warner, and maybe and Mike were talking, is that he stood up and said, this is what I stand for, this is what I want. Who knows what the Eastern Oregon District will want, but from you. But I think it's important that you do, when you do get elected, or even before that you stand for what you believe and say, these are my points, and be strong about it. Am I wrong in saying that?
The only place you're on is reading his tweets. Don't read his tweets anymore.
Oh, God, I know.
Yeah.
I just want to throw those to the wind. But I think that's important because you brought it up, the fact that to do this with the Endangered Species Act is to re-elect him. Because he stood up for it, and he did it. And he did it against who knows whatever odds there were against that. So, and he's a standout for him being what he is a standout. But he is getting things done, and he does have, where he stands. Well, on most occasions, where he stands in the city. So I think, you need to define your values and your beliefs, figure out a way that you can give that to the eastern state of Oregon, and go for it.
Even from a pragmatic standpoint, you've got to know who you can persuade and who you can't. And so let's not communicate to try to persuade the far left. They're gone. They're literally gone. And so let's persuade those that still have active cells up here and can look at an issue. And that means we really have to know, not that I want to belabor the black issue, but we really have to know that issue. And Republicans have such an outstanding record on civil rights. I mean, my goodness, I have seen the original poster from Lincoln's election. A third of that poster is about the abolition of slavery, And we opposed Jim Crow's laws. We did the civil rights bill. You know, Kennedy would never have gotten things through without Republican support. We have a long history of that, and we need to stand on that and trumpet that from everyday federal building. They should set up a speaker on the federal building down in Portland and broadcast that over and over and over again to the rioters. I mean, because I don't think the general public does know that. They buy the narrative that Republicans are just about rich people. I mean, that's laughable. Look at all the rich billionaires supporting the liberals. And they buy the narrative that we're racist. And that's ridiculous. It's never been a part of the Republican Party, ever. Now, not that there aren't individuals, but pragmatically, you know, I think you're going to get more people with courage and standing on what you believe for, but, you know, explaining it from an intellectual basis and a historical and basis so that you can back up those claims. And we just aren't doing it. We're not doing it in the public forum.
What about term limits?
Yeah, 4 term limits. And I signed whatever it was that the term limit group wants. I'm going to guess it's easier for me to suggest term limits at my age. If I was at 35, maybe I wouldn't be as excited about it. Going back to Ms. Hibbert, your remark about tweets. So, you know, I got a call from the White House last Wednesday, and the White House said, we want you to win. We know you support our president. What can we do to help you, have him support you? I said, what do you got? They go, how about a tweet? I said, what would he say? They said, what do you want him to say? So let's at least, you know, one more tweet. 72 million people get the president's tweets. Joe Biden, I believe, is 4. And so he has a machine like no other when it comes to reaching out. And not to mention that horrible thing, money again, that tweet is generally worth between $50,000 and $75,000 to whoever he suggests. I honestly thought we were going to get the president's endorsement a week before the primary. We didn't, but it wasn't for lack of Greg Walter's primary, because he went in and asked personally. 2 or 3 weeks after the primary, Congressman Walden was on Air Force One with the president, and he went up to talk to him about 2 things: the climate and Cliff Bentz. And so we've had, or I have had, the luxury of having my name in that space. You will see a tweet from the president supporting me. On the issue of speaking out where I stand, as you know, in the primary I did that. Pro-Trump, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment. I could go on down the list. On how we're going to manage the issue of race, I talked to Greg about it at length. I talked to 3 other congressmen and women about it as the issues come up and the opportunities presented. And everybody is trying to figure out how to manage it. It's incredibly dangerous because they're going to try to use that argument. When you object to reparations, when you object to whatever defunding police, when you object, you know why? That's because they're going to say you're racist. That's what they're going to do. Guarantee it. And so what we need to do in the space that we are in is approach it so that we are above that in a way that heads off that kind of incorrect and wrong-headed assertion, because it's wrong. I know Kristen Wilson had a point. I think she just, oh, yeah, Alex.
What do you think about Puerto Rican statehood?
I haven't been asked.
All right.
What do you think about it? I honestly, forgive me for being reversing it on you, but I honestly haven't thought about it.
Well, Puerto Ricans don't get to vote for president. They don't get a full vote in Congress. And I think, you know, given that the number of people there, their population is larger than several states, they probably deserve statehood. And that's my opinion on it.
Here's the problem. As you know, the District of Columbia has 750,000 people, and they want statehood. Actually, they don't want statehood. They want 2 U.S. senators. What would that immediately do to what we currently have in the Senate? It would, I guarantee you, they would be Democrats. So obviously, I'm not going to be wildly enthusiastic that's what's going to happen with Puerto Rico, any more than I am about Washington, D.C., because I don't want them to have to use that. So that's where I am on that issue, but I'm happy to be educated on it. You had a question?
Oh, yeah, I was wondering, when you're talking, this was before here with Black Lives Matter and the riots and by the terrorists that are terrorizing downtown Portland and stuff. Do you have access to any of the data of how many people have lost their businesses? How many of our, of our law enforcement have been hurt and injured? Not just the severe injuries, but all of the injuries. And is there a way you can get that data and then start using it instead of going back to the old narrative that 15 unarmed black people lost their lives, but there was 1,000 people that lost their lives across the United States in the same manner? But can you, as a leader, wouldn't that be kind of your obligation to say, okay, this is what these riots are doing to our state and to our community, and call them terrorists, because that's what they are. That's what's happening right now. Is there a way to find the data for how many people have lost their lives?
As of right now, I'm not a senator anymore. I resigned January 2nd. Bill is still a senator, and he has, I think, a massive staff of one. And I have a staff of a few, but they're all busy trying to get me elected. So we're not spending our time trying to find what you just said. When I'm elected in November, because I'm confident I will be, then when I'm sworn in in January, I would have 19 people working in that staff. And at that point, we would have the horsepower to look into and find out what you just said.
Doesn't that kind of reflect on the whole Republican Party? That, because we do have Republicans who are running for office, who are in place and stuff, wouldn't they be able to share that data with the news media, with the people who are concerned, with the people who are being affected? I'm looking at not just you, but the whole Republican Party. Why aren't we hearing how many people's lives have been destroyed who own businesses downtown? How many people's lives have been affected by this so far? And the data's out there somewhere.
It is. What I've tried to do is pull back from that and say, look, when you start rioting, the protest is a part of America, right? But not violent protest. That would be called, you've stepped over the line and now you're a criminal. And so what should be happening when you start committing crimes against property, as you're mentioning, is you should get arrested and put in jail. That's what should happen. It's not happening in Portland. There's been an abdication of responsibility when it comes to law enforcement there. And watching poor Ted Wheeler, who I know quite well, Mayor Wheeler, get down and wander around the crowd, you don't try to reason with the mob any more than you try to reason with a drunk. It's not going to turn out well. And so
I'm talking about trying to persuade people that the Republicans are against this, and this is what's happening because they're being lied to by the media. And the Republicans, don't they have an obligation to their constituencies, to the people that are trying to vote for them, to get the truth out? And people aren't hearing the truth yet.
So I don't disagree. I agree with what you're saying. Now, how to gather that information and how to get it out is a real question. Like I just said, this is the third, I think, of this type of gathering that I've been able to have since the primary, the third one. And so when you talk about getting the word out, how? And the answer is going to be either through social media, we have to hire someone to help with that, or through newspapers, got to pay for it, or through television, got to pay for it. And then you've got to have someone develop your message, got to pay for it. And so the thing to do is to talk to your friends and others and say, hey, if we're going to help these people with their campaigns, write a check. And because how else is it going to happen? I mean, by the way, I rewrote my fundraising letter yesterday on Sunday, 3 hours of rewriting that letter so that it made some sense. And because it's hard to ask 20,000 people for money and do it in a nice way. Once you get the money, how do you spend it? But I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, will you help? Will you help me raise the money to get your message out?
got a mindset that the Republican Party, not just you, but you as a leading member of the Republican Party, needs to really focus on the victims of what all is happening right now. And that doesn't take extra money because the websites and everything, all the social media is already in place. We need,
I understand.
yeah.
Thank you for making it. Yes.
Cliff, I was going to say, we're collecting that money, the Republican legislature. We're collecting that information. The Republican legislature is pretty.
You putting the Republicans in the Oregon legislature are putting together data on the amount of property damage in the
We're collecting all of that money.
and then you'll share it. Okay, now start making that point. Thank you. Yeah.
I'd like to defer to my neighbor.
I want to know what your plans are for Eastern Oregon and the district that you're going to represent when you're elected. We've got issues with EPA, we've got unemployment issues, we've got all kinds of federal agencies that are butting into the business of working class people, farmers, and the timber industry, mining, all of that. Howard, we need to resolve some of these issues, and we need somebody in Washington that's going to work to help us resolve some of those issues. What are your ideas on that?
Well, thank you for the question. It's a really good question, and I appreciate it. So for 12 years, I was in the Oregon legislature, 8 of them with Bill Hansell, addressing those kinds of issues. I learned about a week after I announced I was going to run for this job that the focus instantly shifted away from that absolutely necessary work and into these other issues. But let me answer the question. Here's my plan. The committees that I mentioned earlier, I need to get on the proper committees. I don't have to be on them because I understand now that you can have an impact on any of these areas even though you're not on the committee by having appropriate friends on those committees, getting one of your staff members to follow what's going on in those committees, appearing at those committee meetings to make sure that whatever you're trying to get done in your district is done. Because I certainly can't be on all the committees that are going to be addressing the issues you just raised. But I'll sure try to get on the ones that most of the time are dealing with committees here. Here's the, if our president gets reelected, if we maintain control of the Senate, then one of my main reasons for running has been to do something good for this space when it comes to forest policy and when it comes to water. So those two huge issues here. Also when it comes to trade, also when it comes to the EPA, also all of those issues I worked along with Bill so hard on in Salem. And so I would begin to, or continue to work on those same issues working with county commissioners as best I possibly could to understand what the needs are for Union County or for Umatilla County or you name it, any one of the 20 counties in this district. And I would do my best to help. Remember, if we control those other spaces, we can do something legislatively. Maybe. Because remember, the House basically has a veto power because Pelosi's in charge of it. So you could get it through Senate. You could have the president's acquiescence, but you couldn't get it through the House. So the hope is we would take back the House. If we have all three of those things, then we would begin to work on our water issues, which I think are huge. And rather than just say what would we do on the water issues, we would continue to try to hold our position on waters of the United States, which has been helped enormously by the president and certain other actions, some of them because of federal judges. And just so you know, I was asked by Greg Walden to help vet the most recent appointee to the Ninth Circuit and to the Oregon District Court of Appeals in Portland. I was asked to help select those people and then say to the president, these are the ones that should be appointed. The ones that I helped select were both appointed. Brian Bounds didn't make it through the first cut, but Judge Hunsaker did make it through. And those kinds of, having that help at that judicial level will help us preserve some of the things we're trying to do in the water space and in the timber space. So I'll continue at all those different levels to try to help. But the main thing to do is turn to the county courts and say, what do you need? What do you want? Or to you and say, what do you need? What do you want? And then try to use the tools that are available to accomplish what you accomplish. But I've got to learn all that, so I'm doing that. When I won the primary, I ordered, I think, 12 or 16 books on Amazon, all I need to do Congress, how to work within it. And I'm reading those every night and every weekend and trying to get to a point of understanding so I can do a better job for this district. That's my plan.
This racial thing that we've got going on now, it's been building for years and years. And it's not going to go away. And I think a lot of our politicians are losing their focus on getting business done because of all the hubbub of what's going on in the media. And certainly there are racial issues that we need to address, but we still need to take care of business, getting America back to work, getting some of this deregulation done so farmers and miners and people in agriculture can actually make a living and, be able to do it without, spending hours and hours every day. I'm just recently retiring as a contractor, and one of the reasons I am is because I'm sick of the regulations. Every time I turn around, I think I'm complying with the regulations, and I check the website, and then all of a sudden I find out, wow, I did that wrong. I sure hope they don't catch me because that could be a $1,500 fine. Things like that. They don't, government's not putting information out, and you have to dig like a dog to be able to figure out what's going on so you're doing it right and you don't get penalized down the road.
So I understand all that since as a lawyer, I don't know how many contractors I've represented, dozens, and getting them out of soup when they did step over one of those regulatory lines. More and more and more of them all the time. I get it. Now, how much I'll be able to do about that in Washington, I don't know. I will tell you this. I'm not AOC. I won't have cameras following me down the hallway when I show up. One of my opponents in the primary said Washington was abuzz when you heard that he might show up in Washington. I guarantee you, Washington is not abuzz because Cliff Bentz might show up. But I'll do what I did along with Bill's work. I'll outwork just about anything. I'll know more than almost everything about these issues. That's why I'm going back there. I'm not going back there for the hat. I don't need a hat. What I do want to do is help this space. And what you just said, I'll be trying.
Are you familiar with the Heritage Foundation?
Yes.
Because I'm a member of that organization. And I know for one thing that when you are elected and go to Washington, D.C., they will provide a class for you and all the other newbies that come into D.C. to tell you the ins and outs of doing your job most effectively. Have you ever heard of Public Lands for the People? This is a mining group of professional and part-time miners, which we are, that is trying to preserve the 1894 mining law, federal law, on federal land, and both Washington, Oregon, and California have outlawed dredging in the rivers, which cause zero damage to the rivers. And all there is a plus as they take out the mercury that has been in the rivers because it's caught in the dredges. Millions of dollars have been lost by all three states from the revenue that they would have reaped by not being dictators and outlawing. The gold mining industry in the state of Oregon used to be in the very top of the industries in the Sumter, Granite area of Oregon. And those mines were not shut down because they weren't making gold. They were shut down because they were required to for World War II. So the gold is still there to be mined and other minerals, but they can't do it because the state of Oregon is overriding federal law. And I'm sure when you get to Washington, D.C., you will be contacted by them because we do have a lot of financial backing and a lot of influence in that arena. And it's something that's the liberals have taken away from the miners who made money for the state. So those are two areas that I think are very, very important. Also, and I know that you will not live in fear of the Heritage Foundation, but they have a grading system where they grade all the legislators in both levels as to how they are doing. And even though I voted for Greg Walden and have supported him, I think he only had a 65% heritage grade. So it made me stop and think, maybe he isn't doing the job I think he's doing. And so I did some work on that, and I'm not going to go into that's all history. But I think it's very important to listen. The Heritage Foundation owns a square block in Washington, D.C., and it's 6 or 7 stories high. They've got hundreds and hundreds of people working for them that are very, very smart. And they'd be a good guidance for anybody.
Right, and I've used their materials in the past. Just so you know, I brought more bills successfully through the Oregon legislature on mining and pro-mining than anybody else in the last 10 years. And that one of the reasons is because we have such huge, incredibly valuable resources in southeastern Oregon, including this incredible deposit of lithium down by McDermott, immediately adjacent to an incredible deposit of uranium, immediately next to McDermott. And then my brother, the one that used to be county sheriff in Malheur County, has been working with the gold mining group. I think they're on their 3rd owner now as they fought their way through the regulatory process on the gold mine 20 miles out of Vail. And it looks like we'll finally get it done. It's 80 to 200 jobs, incredibly good paying jobs. The mine is 800 feet below the surface. It's a tunnel down, a mine up, fill up the hole. About 40 acres disturbed on the surface. You would think that we have destroyed the planet when it comes to what we've tried to do to try to get that, so we could finally get those jobs and get that mineral out. But I was the one that managed to get $500,000 to have a total summary of all the mineral resources known at this point put on the internet. That was me. I got that bill passed, and Dogami was in shock that finally someone would actually know what kind of minerals we had in Oregon and could go online to find out, because the environmentalists were trying to keep it hidden. And I could go through, and I tried to save the dredge mining, I think 3 separate times. The reason the bill finally passed is because Dr. Bates, the champion of it, died, you may recall, and they jammed it through over everybody because they based it upon a vote because of his death. But I thought we actually had to stop. But I could go on for an hour. I won't stop right there. See if there's any more questions.
Yeah. I've got to run. It's about 4 o'clock, and I was very glad when you put your name in for this position. I've worked with you and your firm for many years. I know you're a smart guy with a lot of integrity, and I know you'll do a great job. Thank you for coming today.
Judge, you're very kind, and I'm very happy to see you here, and I'm glad you're participating. And the board, I'd much rather have a group like this than what I saw when I met for my first time with the Democrats in Cape Falls. You want to have a learning experience. Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah, very well.
Well, at least we didn't have rioters here.
Not yet.
So far.
I got one question. Where you are standing today, is there any chance at all you could get any commercial people in Elgin?
I'm sorry, we get retail people?
Yeah.
I mean, retail activities in Elgin. You mean like stores?
Yeah, stores and things like that come to Elgin.
So
is there any way you can do that?
Only indirectly. So the key for Elgin, or the key for any small former timber town, like Elgin, my step-grandmother lived there for many years. That is to utilize the resources that surround it. Oh, I know, timber. And so the trick of getting activities in Elgin turns on the ability to have reasons to go to Elgin, and that has to do with natural resources. So I will be working on that in any number of ways. But you're not going to get somebody suddenly to show up in Elgin unless other people are coming there. So the trick is to build on the assets that are surrounding you. And I
We have done that, working on that strongly now.
Yes, right. And when I met with you guys up there, I think I went through the life work strategy I've used on a small community. But that is, I'll do a lot of things to help on at the bigger level of getting more economic activity.
Throw some names in the hat.
Okay. Okay, I think we're finished here. Unless Alex.
Yeah,
Well, everyone, I wanted to say thank you for coming and listening to Senator Cliff Bentz. The Republican Party of Union County wanted to remind you to vote for Republicans up and down the ballot. That's Donald Trump for President, Joe Ray Perkins for Senate, Cliff Bentz for United States Congress, Kim Thatcher for Secretary of State, Bill Hansell for State Senator, Bobby Levy for State Representative, me for Mayor of the Grande, and I'm pretty sure next week we're going to be endorsing Mayor Alan Duffy again. So